started. Good afternoon and welcome to our virtual gathering presented by the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. We are the statewide membership-based historic preservation organization. My name is Beverly Thomas, and on behalf of the Alliance, I'm pleased to welcome you to Assessing Your House Before Work Begins with Steve Bedard. We launched our Old House and Barn Expo on the road in March as our COVID-safe replacement of our postponed 2020 Expo, and we'll be offering these virtual sessions throughout the year to include some in-person events in the fall as well. We always enjoy getting you and other old house and barn owners together to share practical information from highly qualified presenters, make connections, and offer you a dose of energy and inspiration too. A few housekeeping points I'd like to mention before we get started. We are recording today, so please stay muted to keep the background noise to a minimum. You may want to spotlight the speaker during the presentation by choosing the side-by-side speaker option under the view feature. Today's presentation will be about 45 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A period. I'll wrap up the program by 6, but Steve has agreed to stay on for an additional 15 minutes if you'd like to join in for the additional time with additional questions or further discussion. Because of our high numbers today, we encourage you to use the chat function with any questions during the presentation, and we will address those questions during the Q&A period. And before we close, we'll select the lucky winner of our Expo door prize. And now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker. Steve Bedard of Bedard Preservation and Restoration has over 45 years of experience working on old structures, primarily houses and barns, dating from 1665 to 1963. Steve uses a common sense approach in all aspects of his work, from building evaluations and assessments to complete exterior and interior restorations. He works with mechanical contractors to ensure 21st century comfort and convenience while still maintaining the highest level of preservation standards and ethics. Steve is a great friend of the Preservation Alliance, and we are so pleased to have him with us today. So take it away, Steve.
Hello, everybody. We're going to talk today about assessing your house before work begins. This is very important so you get to be grounded, so you know where you're going, where you're headed, what your options are, both for projects as well as financially. So assessing your house before work begins. What do you have? What an assessment will tell you. It gives you existing building conditions, building's architectural features, primary space and secondary space, solutions to your building's problems, typical range of costs to do the work, phasing in of work based upon money if required. We all don't have a big chunk of money to be able to spend all at once, so we typically have to phase these projects in over time. And if you're a group or yourself, or you want to have adaptive use of structure, if applicable, let's say you had a small barn that you wanted, or a large barn that you want to convert to living space, how you would go through that approach and the cost related to that. Who benefits from assessment? Existing homeowners, people taking over for a parent, keeping the property in the family, just purchased house, potential owners interested in purchasing an old house. It's really important that you might want to call someone, whether it be myself or someone else, to do a brief assessment before you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of money. But during COVID, that's happened quite a bit. I've gotten quite a few phone calls from people saying, I just bought a house. I live in Florida. I bought a house sight unseen. And now could you come do an assessment? It's a big gamble, but in these times, maybe that's what you have to do. Some people have to do that way. Nonprofits, municipalities, faith-based groups, especially if those groups are thinking about maybe doing some fundraising in the future or going for some Moose Plate money or LCHIP money. This is the first step in the process to get an understanding and idea of what you have and what your potential is and what your plans are. And then from there, you can do other studies that are required from those groups would be done, but it gives you a good baseline documentation, a good start. Existing conditions. Here's a good example of what happens, not to this extreme, but I would say 95% of the buildings I look at over the last 46 years have problems like this, where you have water as it comes off the roof, can't get away from the building because there's a negative slope to the building. So it comes off the roof and then goes right back into the foundation, into the basement, and causes all kinds of problems from there. Here's a situation where this owner had a gutter installed, but you can see the gutter dumps right next to the foundation and just continues to, as the water comes off the roof, it just goes back into the basement. Then to add insult to injury, a lot of times the homeowner will then have to put in a sub pump. And if they don't run the sub pump far enough away from the opening, they just let it go outside the basement window, and that just continues to cycle the water over and over again and cause problems. Picture on the right is just an area that's fairly new construction, but it has settled, and water there again is coming off the slope and running towards the building. Foundation issues. This can be where water has gotten in behind stones and made them move, and the freezing and thawing cycles have caused problems. This building, particular building, the soil is built up so much that it's already over the sill and the clapboards, so that needs to be removed so you can get the foundation to actually do work on it. Here's a foundation at Strawberry Bank that was built on unstable soil. This is all built on fill back in, I believe, 1800. And so this foundation had moved almost a foot in one direction. Since then, they've recently dug down, put appropriate spread footings in, and with rebar, and tie them to new concrete walls below grade, and then put the stones right back in place where they were originally. This is at Castle in the Clouds. This is what happens when water gets behind a veneered stone situation. This was done in the 1990s. It was infilling the exercise arena for the horses at Castle in the Clouds to make the patio for dining. So they poured a concrete slab on top of this wall, but rather than having the concrete slab come all the way over to the edge of it, they let it sit inside of that wall, and water, because there was no drainage involved, water got down between the edge of the concrete slab and this wall and blew the veneer off. That project was $190,000 done in 1992, I believe. We had to go in and rip it all out and start from scratch. So water is very important, that you keep water off and away from the building. This is Sills and Frame, but you can see the foundation. This is a house in Portsmouth that had some sill damage and some foundation damage. So we were able to dig that up, repoint the foundation, and then do the sill repair work. Here's a situation where, and you'll come across this, where you've got a building on your property and you can't afford to do a lot to it at the moment and make all the appropriate structural repairs and put in a new foundation, or a post is kicked out. But this is a method of providing a temporary fix so that the building won't sag further than it already had. This building had actually sagged 1.5 feet in one corner. It was a 32 by 68 foot barn. And this is what they had done to temporarily support it. Once we jacked it up and did some more supporting, we were able to take it down. This is the last half of it coming down now. And you can see that the frame looks nice and straight, and will make a nice reuse project. This double English barn was threatened to be torn down. It wound up going to become the Woodshed restaurant in Moltenboro. Windows. Here's a scenario. Here's a situation where these are the same window openings. They've just been refurbished. The window headers on the left are missing, had been removed later on and been replaced. When not been replaced, just left and clapboarded over straight across. And what we did is we put the window headers back in place and made them truer to the original design. Siding, clapboards are always an issue. And we're always talking about how to do clapboards, and you're always trying to save as many clapboards as you can and tooth them in, piece them in rather than removing whole sections if possible, if they're still in serviceable condition. What we go by, we basically use a rule of thumb that if you can see 50% of you do it on a per side basis. So if you're looking at a side and 50% of that side is damaged, it needs to be replaced, then you should consider replacing all of it. If it's less than that, then what you do is you tooth the clapboards in and make repairs as such. Because we're always trying to save as much original fabric as possible, but still being reasonable in the approach that we take. Here's a house at Strawberry Bank that had no major work done to it except a roof and a paint job in 65 years. And this building was part of their Heritage House program, where they had 9 buildings that fit that same category. And this is one of them that we were involved with. You can see the condition of the clapboards is such that there's more than 50% there that's damaged. And it was like that across all of the sides. This is the east side of the building. The water comes off from the east, and you can see this is the kind of damage that can occur behind the clapboards. The corner post that you see to the right is the only thing in that corner holding the building up. There's no post. Right in front of you can see halfway up above the window, there's a girt that runs across there. That's already failed. The sills are gone on this side. So there's quite an extensive amount of work that needed to be accomplished. Roof. There again, you keep water off your roof and away from your building, you win. This is actually an asbestos roof project. You see the chimney's no prize either. And this roof got replaced. It wasn't leaking at this time, but it obviously needs to be replaced. So you always want to try to do things whenever possible before they actually start to become a problem. Because once they become a problem, it can happen very quickly. And also, at that point, you're paying higher fees to have someone come in and do the work because it's on an emergency basis. This is the damage you see here is caused from a leaky gutter. This is years and years of neglect. There wasn't much sign of it on the outside of the building or on the inside of the building. But this is what happened when that gutter that was across the whole front, that corner leaked behind it and leaked down through the siding and the sheathing and into the posts and into the girts and down to the sill. Here's another example of water being an issue. This is Mark Wentworth home in Portsmouth, the portico out front. And this was originally built in this part was built in 1819 and had some repairs onto it. And they didn't, even though they had access to the gutters and the gutters were only 10 feet off the ground and they could see it from a window upstairs, they missed it and got plugged with leaves, and then the gutters didn't work and the water got into the different areas. You can see any of that cracking material, that's all where water has gotten in behind it and caused damage. Chimneys. Chimney's another one where it's potential for water to get into your house and cause problems. The chimney on your left needs to be, at the very least, repointed. probably could be rebuilt from the ground, from the roof line up. When you redo a chimney top, you always want to be using water-struck brick for that purpose. Old bricks will only last for so long, and then they will deteriorate and spall and become powdery, and then you got to take the whole piece down anyway. So you'd wind up doing a new chimney top with a new wash above it and reflash the chimney. And otherwise, you're going to wind up with continual leaking problems like you see on the right, which can cause mold problems. So it's something else that needs to be taken care of. Electrical. If you see any of these two examples in your house, you need to have be concerned about your electrical situation. Anytime you have open junction boxes, like you see on your left, or a junction box that's not located appropriately on your right, it's actually buried. And then there are the knockouts don't have any protection, so a critter can crawl in there. You want to question and you want to try to get that stuff removed and taken care of as quickly as possible. Plumbing. Typically, when you walk around, you can look at plumbing and look at plumbing fixtures and sink fixtures and sinks and lavatories and all of that, and get a general idea of what you're up against. In these situations, you're talking about replacing all of the plumbing and all of the lines to the plumbing, as well as probably the waste lines also. You just have to figure that into your assessment, figure that into the cost of what things are going to cost when you do your new bathroom or your new kitchen. Heating. Here's an area where a homeowner can actually do some work themselves. It doesn't sound like that would be possible with heating, but yes, it is. There's something you can do to save quite a bit of money. Here's the example where the plenum has the major trunk line, hot air trunk line off of the plenum that sits on top of the furnace that has the hot air in it, distributes it from there to the trunk lines and then out to the individual registers in each room to provide your heat, has separated from the plenum itself. And you can see the gap that's there. And so it's very important that you make sure all your connections are tight. There are no gaps or holes like this. You can, once you get them tightened, you can use a tape, a metal tape, and I would suggest you buy it from like FW Webb's or a plumbing supply house rather than Home Depot or Lowe's, because that tape just doesn't work for very long. It's about $24 a roll, but it's really good stuff compared to the $5 or $6 per roll you pay at Home Depot or Lowe's. If you do seal that, you can also, if you don't want to use the tape, you can use a mastic, which is perfectly acceptable. And you're going to seal not only the joints where it connects to other ductwork, but you're also going to seal any elbows. Because if you think about that elbow, why it's able to be adjustable is because there's space between the joints. So you want to seal all those joints and areas. If you do that, you save an automatic 15 to 25% on your fuel bill. If you decide to insulate it, and you'll see to the right, you'll see some the shiny stuff at the very bottom, and to the left, that insulation will have you save another 15 to 25% on your fuel bill. So right off the bat, something you can do yourself, you can save between 30 and 50%. However, you'll notice that there's an elbow in front of you with flex ducts in it. Flex duct is something that shouldn't be used if possible, because that's a right angle right there that's performing, and because there's no hard right angle behind it, inside of that flex duct, it crushes down, and therefore you're not getting the flow out of the flex duct that you would normally get out of a heat register. The idea is to get the heat from that furnace as warm and as quickly to each room in your house as fast as possible. Hot water. Here's what we see. We typically see is our hot water heater. What we've switched over to about 15 years ago is the use of tankless, on-demand, whole house water heaters, especially if you have natural gas or propane gas capability. Rather than heating, they're much more efficient and therefore less costly. You're not heating up 40, 50, or 60 gallons of water that just sits there sometimes for days on end, not being used. So that's certainly a consideration on how to get up to a more modern technology and be more energy efficient. Insulation. Insulation is always an issue, and we talk a lot about insulation. Here it is in the basement. This is where someone has tried to insulate their basement by putting up fiberglass insulation between the floor joists over their heads in the basement. And what happens is the critters crawl up in there, and a cat crawls up in there and causes problems and rips it all down and makes a mess. Now you create a spot for mold and mildew and high humidity levels in your basement. So we don't recommend that you insulate your basement floor. We do recommend that you spend the time to get the perimeter of your stone foundation above grade repointed. I know at my house, I had my foundation repointed above the ground level about 5 or 6 years ago. And the temperature downstairs increased by about 15 degrees, just doing that alone. So there again, no insulation in the basement. And no plastic in the basement on the ceiling either. The other issue concerning about basements is we want to always try to keep the moisture levels down to discourage mold and mildew. So we recommend the use of a dehumidifier that's piped to a drain in the floor or outside if possible. Something that's run at somewhere between 55 and 60% humidity from March until October. You cannot run them year round because if the temperature gets down low enough, the condenser will actually freeze and cause problems. So it's about a $300 investment, roughly speaking, but it's well worth the cost to do that. And there's a whole discussion we could have too about vapor barriers on floors and all that. That's also very important. Also, since we're talking about critters, I brought today a piece of hardware cloth. It's 1/2-inch hardware cloth that comes in rolls. And when you're doing any type of restoration work where you have holes, and you've probably seen them around your studding between the sills and the studs or anywhere in the attic, this is a good product that you can bend and fold however you like and put it in place. And mice cannot crawl through this. And so we put this on, when we do a preservation project, we put this in every single bay where there's a mouse hole or a critter hole, squirrel, even raccoons. You got to keep raccoons out, right, Beverly? So, so this is something that can be purchased at most hardware stores or farm supply stores. Let's see what else I got. Septic and well. Do you have your own septic system, or do you have towns and city sewer? Do you have your own dug or artesian well, or town and city water? These are just types of things that we would discuss in an assessment to try to figure out costs. If it's not unusual for me to go to a home and saying, we just purchased it. We don't know where it is. We don't know where the septic system is. We don't have city, town, or water. We know that. And then, or somebody will say, I don't know, our family's lived here for so long. We don't even think we have a septic system. We might have just a leach finger. So these are the types of things that we need to tally up with some numbers to be able to make sure that you've planned enough on your budget or prioritize things. If you're thinking about doing a major renovations, a lot of towns will say, okay, you have a septic system here that, Grammy's been using for, 25 years by herself. Now you're talking about doing a family and doing an addition. Your system may be fine, but we want you to at least get a new design built such that if your old system fails, you will be able to build a new one. And we know it'll meet current regulations. Before we do building age and go on to the building age, I just want to talk to you something about common sense approach. And I don't know if I mentioned this later on in the program or not. I've forgotten. But we like to take a common sense approach to projects, and you should be thinking along these lines yourselves. Technology is good, and as I mentioned earlier, but there are some examples where technology is not really going to be the way to go. We worked up the castle in the clouds for about 14 years, and when we first got there, it was a very daunting task given all the problems they had, and they had a tremendous amount of water in their basement. They had a $60,000 study done. This is 14, 15 years ago. It was very comprehensive, and the engineers and architects decided that the only way to resolve the water issue was to dig up around the entire structure of the building, and which was going to cost around $180,000. And I don't even know how that was going to be accomplished, because the castle is built right directly on ledge. So that would have been an interesting process anyway. So I waited for a dry day, and I stuck a hose down in a gutter. And all the gutters to the castle are out at the very eaves, and they lean back. They go back towards the building. As I put the hose in the gutter, within a couple of minutes, there was water pouring out into the basement. And what happened was just a pipe downstairs, part of the drainage system, had frozen at some point in time, was leaking in a wall, and that's what causing all this water to occur down there. Another example was that they had an engineer, an air specialist, recommend, because of being a museum and needing makeup air for public, because you have the public involved, that because the windows did not operate, that they should spend $120,000 on a ventilation system. So I said, well, I think we got another idea. So we spent $15,000 and fixed the windows, so the windows could be opened. So there again, it's just common sense approach to how you do these things can save you quite a bit of money. Building age and architectural features. Age of building, date the building, based upon its features, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century building components, and now I guess we have to say 21st century building components. That's important to know when you are trying to do work on your house and you want to put in kitchens and bathrooms. And so you want to understand what you have for features, building components, and how those evolved over time. So here's the evolution of the building's elements. This is a 1770s panel wall that someone in around 1820 had added a mantle to. So you don't want to necessarily remove the mantle. That can stay in place as part of the natural evolution of the building. So I can only have so much time here. So if you really need to have this book, everybody who owns an old house should have this book. It's by Jim Garvin. His knowledge is, there's no one as knowledgeable about Jim that I know of, that anybody, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. His knowledge is incredible. And this book will actually go through and talk about each of the different building components and their ages based upon the construction. Here's an example where on the left-hand side, you have an 18th century raised panel with a thumb molding. And on the right-hand side, you have a 1810, 1820 molded raised panel door. On the left-hand side, you see, this is the back, left-hand side. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. I had to get back to where we were, Beverly.
You're going back. You're good. There you go.
Okay. So on the left-hand side, you see the board here. The back side of the board is showing that this board was sawn on a water-powered mill. Some people call it up and down sawmill. And this board was produced most likely prior to 1850. The board on your right is a circular sawn board, when that technology came in around 1850. Now there's typically some overlap. That's a general date that we use for that type of saw marks that we see. If you're at the Shelburne Museum in Shelburne, Vermont, you'll see a mill that was an up and down sawmill that was used up until 1870s, I believe. The old gentleman running it wasn't going to switch over. The other one he was using was fine. He didn't want to spend the money. So therefore he just kept using his up and down sawmill. But generally speaking, if you see those marks, it's the one on the left is prior to 1850. The one on the right is after 1850. You can tell a lot just from a board. Here's a couple of boards, and first thing you can see that you see the irregularity in the surface. That means it's hand planed. You see shadow marks where it was up against something, so you get a hint of what it was. And what this was the ceiling of a room that was meant to be exposed, of a wooden ceiling that was meant to be exposed. So that's the information we can glean from that particular board. Hinges can tell a lot. The hinges on your left are foliated hinges that were popular all the way up until about 1850. After that, you see more H and L hinges like you see on your right. Both of these are held on with handmade nails. Thumb latches can tell a story. On your left, you see a bean cusp latch, which were pretty popular until about 1790s. Norfolk latch you see in the middle was popular from that period until about 1830s, and then the latch on your far right became popular from 1840 on, and until probably 1860. Nail types. Nail on your far left is a handmade nail. This particular handmade nail is pointed. It's made by a blacksmith, and then the head is actually hand hammered into it. This one's in the shape of a butterfly or a figure eight. The nail in the middle is a cut nail that's actually cut and sheared on a machine. The handmade nail on your left was available pretty much in most cities and towns till around 1795, unless you ever were a blacksmith in town or had a friend who was a blacksmith, you would continue to use those. After that, they were shipping barrels and barrels of cut nails from England to us. And the nail on your right is the cut nail in the center dates from that 1795 period till about 1880s. The roundhead stick nail that you see on your right is a nail that's available after that, all the way up through current modern times. Identifying primary and secondary space. There again, if you have features in your house, especially like the room on your left, you don't want to be putting a kitchen or a bathroom in here. You want to, and most of the time, the fancier rooms are in the front part of the house anyway. You want to be putting those features in the back side of the house, which may or may not have as much detail. This particular instance, it does have dental molding, which is kind of fancy and certainly dates from that same time period, but is a better location to put kitchen or bathroom. Here's the same situation. Here's an old kitchen with a sink and a stairway that went upstairs, and one that went underneath it downstairs. And this is where the decision was made to put a new kitchen with a new set of stairs going to the second floor that met code. The room on the right is another example of a good place to be able to put a bathroom or a kitchen. Solution to your building's problem. After identifying all the issues, then explain how the issues can be resolved. So when you have an assessment done, I know this is how I do them. We're talking with the homeowner. We've identified the issues. We're trying to explain how those issues can be solved, and using that common sense approach to save as much money as possible. Typical cost to resolve problems. Your assessment should give you a realistic approximate cost from a small project to a complete restoration. The smaller the project, the easier it is to identify to a certain extent. The larger the project, you're really looking at it most likely from a square foot basis, cost per square foot. And those vary depending upon the type of restoration that's involved, the amount of restoration involved. But you should be able to come up with some approximate ballpark range of what the cost will be. If you can't afford all at once, what will we do? You can prioritize things, you can stabilize things, you can phase in over a number of years, different projects. You may have you may have a nice house, or you have a nice barn, but the barn has a roof that's leaking, and you can't afford to put the money into the barn. You really can only afford to put it in the house. At this point, you might want to just stabilize the barn and put the most inexpensive metal roof you can find on it, just as a temporary fix until you can get to that project. And again, phasing in over a number of years is also very good from a pocketbook perspective. It's all about the planning. Here's some before and after photographs. Here's that house at Strawberry Bank on the left, and here's before, and here's the after of it. And that was about a 1.5-year project altogether. But now that it's done and has all the modern conveniences, it's set up for air conditioning, central air conditioning, new heating system, new everything. There's not going to be any maintenance costs for probably the first 20 years or so. Even the way that the clapboards are done, clapboards are all back primed before they're installed and then repainted. So once you do a whole project, your maintenance costs, at least for the first 10 to 15 years, are going to be very minimal. Reuse of old structures for other needs. This was a barn that was going to be demolished, and we were able to go in there and grab it before the wrecker came, and made it into a horse barn, returned it to the same purpose, just in a different location. This was a barn on your left that had 2 big holes in the roof. This was in Northampton. It was a 40 by 80 barn, a Yankee barn, center aisle, 3,200 square feet of floor space. This again was going to be demolished because of the hole in the roof and whatnot. So on the right, it was moved to Gilmanton, reassembled, and used as their year-round library. The use of radiant heat is another important thing that you can do in a situation like this. So it's basically on a slab, radiant heat in a slab. It only costs them about $220 per month to heat that entire structure with radiant heat. Heat pumps are now coming into popularity. The technology has gotten better. So we look forward to using those also. What do we do with all the information? After addressing the needs found from the assessment, now add 21st century comfort and convenience to your building while retaining those historic features that you identified. And that's it. Is there any questions?
Thanks so much, Steve. Yeah, we have a bunch of questions, so I'm just going to facilitate them for now, and then we'll see how it goes from there. One great question relating to knob and tube wiring.
Okay.
Tell us what you think. Robin has knob and tube wiring, and she wanted your opinion on that. Is that something to be scared of? Should she immediately get to that, or what do you think?
She should immediately get to that. Knob and tube wiring is not a bad wiring system. You have 2 separated wires. There is no ground. As long as those 2 wires don't cross, there's not a problem. But they're not meant to take current loads from the appliances we have nowadays either. So I would recommend that you get that replaced as soon as possible.
Okay.
And don't let anybody convince you to just tie into it and use it.
So take it all out.
Take it all out. Now, when I say take it all out, What we typically do is we take most of it out, disconnect what we leave, and to leave it so it's part of the history of the house, and that was the first electricity that people had. So it's kind of, you're leaving part of the history of the house there for people to see.
Okay. And then Diane has a follow-up, and I'm not sure if it relates to this. Diane, can you unmute yourself and explain when you say even the silver coiled tubing?
Yes, I was told that was the next step up from knob and tube. And he showed it in one of the pictures there.
Oh, yes. It's BX, it's called BX cable. Yes, that is the next step, and that typically does not have a ground wire in it. And in wet conditions, especially in basements, can short out. So that too is something that also should be removed.
Okay, great. And then going down into the basement.
Okay.
Talking about water in your basement, Diane says she gets 2 inches of water in the basement in the spring, but it quickly dries up. Is that a concern?
If it's just a high water table where the water is coming up through the drains or through a drain, we have 3 separate basements at my house, and that are not connected. And the middle basement, when we have a high water table, will come up through the drain. Other than that, any water that gets in there is from the not having a pitch away from your building. So I would look to make sure that you have adequate pitch away from your building so water's not coming off the roof and running into your foundation. If that's the case, then if it is coming from the ground, then it's not really an issue if it goes away fairly quickly.
Okay, so if it's groundwater, there's not a whole bunch you can do. Is that what you're saying?
Other than a sub pump, you got to put a sub pump in, and hopefully it'll keep up. A good size sub pump, it'll keep up with it until that water level comes down. You just got to make sure that your exit hose is far enough away from your foundation so it just doesn't keep cycling back and forth.
Okay. All right. And then relating to basement insulation, we know you said don't insulate the basement or the bottom of the first floor, the ceiling of the basement. Joe asked, do you recommend insulating the rim joists?
No, it's we didn't talk about spray foam at all, which we probably should. Which we should talk about spray foam.
Yeah.
Spray foam is not recommended for old structures. The Secretary of Interior's guidelines on old structures is that it's not recommended because it is not reversible. If you ever try to work on a house that it has spray foam in it, it is extremely difficult to get at and see what the problem is. So if you want to do something with perimeter rim joists, there is really nothing. If you put fiberglass in there, what's going to happen is the mice are going to crawl in it. It's going to absorb moisture. If you spray foam it and you have a problem with a sill or something around that or that rim joist, you can't get at it to fix it. You can't tell where it was leaking. You can't tell what the problem was or where the rot was. So we just don't recommend it. We recommend tightening up the foundation, and that would also mean where the sill meets the top of the foundation.
And can you address like chimney chases and things in the basement and how important it is to seal that up?
Chimney chases. So, yeah, a lot of times is your chimney is sitting on a stack, or it's sitting on a brick archway or a granite archway or whatever. And there are spaces sometimes from the basement up that go up along the chimney all the way through into the attic. And that's not a good space to have from a fire perspective. To meet code, when we do restoration work, we actually have to provide a aluminum flashing or metal flashing around that space so that any air as well as potential fire could not race up next to the chimney and go all the way up into the attic that way. So you want to close those spaces off.
Okay. And feel free to put questions in the chat, folks, but I have a bunch of questions here, so I'll keep asking them. Can you address the importance of good quality building materials, Steve? You touched on it, but maybe stress that a little more. Clapboards and things like that.
Yeah, clapboards are a good example. Clapboards have improved over the years what's available to the general public. Generally speaking, on clapboards, we use spruce, extra clear, quarter sawn, spruce clapboards, or extra clear, quarter sawn, cedar clapboards. And these are all back primed before they're installed. And when the cuts are made on the ends, they're also hit with a paint brush at that point. Each of the guys who's doing that type of work will have a little container full of paint, little ice cream container, Talenti ice cream, or something like that. And they just cut a slot in the top, and you stick a little paintbrush in there, and then you just have a little paint in there. You can dab the ends of any of those connections. If you do that, you're going to have your products are going to, your product is such a good product that your whole project is going to last longer and require you to have less maintenance over the years and all that. So good quality materials are important. Right now, materials are a huge issue in that they are hard to get and they're expensive. 2x4s that we purchased last March 2020 at $2.95 are now around $8 a piece. Plywood, Vantech plywood and things like that were $25 are now $70 to $80 a sheet. So it's a huge problem. But that problem is not as much of a problem for people who own their own house, because most of your house is already there. You've already bought the materials. It's all there. You don't have to go out and build a whole new frame. Right now, the cost of materials on a new house have gone up an additional $36,000 on the average house. You won't have that problem with an old house.
So Steve, can you address if somebody wanted to start on a whole house rehab, but they really were restricted financially and couldn't do it all at once? What would you recommend to check off first? Or how would you start?
First thing I would do is make sure you and your spouse are in tune. I'm very fortunate to have a very understanding, loving wife. We've been married for 44 years. As we like to say, 35 good ones, because there's going to be issues that come up. There's going to be, thoughts on how things are going to get done, how long it's going to take. But if you're in agreement on this process work, you're obviously trying to protect the envelope of the property of your building first. Keep the water and rain off you, make it more comfortable inside. So you're taking care of the outside as much as you can that you need to do that. And then you're working on room or a couple rooms at a time. That's how we did our house over a number of years. We lived in the L of the house, actually, just in those 3 rooms. And then we eventually did 1 room at a time or 2 rooms into the main house and moved into those rooms and then renovated everything else. So there's different.
Well, that's a good point. Move in, if you can, move into one section of the house.
Yeah.
So you're not totally living in the chaos.
Maybe put the new kitchen in, or be in that section with a new bathroom, and then have a bedroom there and a little den or something, and live in that L for now. And then get that to be very comfortable, rewire it, insulate it, all those things, then move into the main house.
So how about if you know you have to rewire your whole house? It's kind of hard to do 1 room at a time though, right?
It is hard to do 1 room at a time. So certain projects, for instance, I was told when we bought our house that they had already rewired. There was a brand new panel there. The first day when I was looking in the attic, I lifted up a board and I could see where they had connected new wires onto old wires. So I knew it hadn't been redone. So I said to myself, this is too dangerous. I don't know what they've done. So I eliminated everything back to the panel and just put a few circuits on that and ran 1 new circuit out to the old part of the house. So it gave us a circuit to be able to run tools off of to do the restoration work. And then we added electricity beyond that point as we went along.
Okay.
Speaking of electrical panels, we don't put them in the basement anymore. We get them out of the basement. It's damp and causes them to rust and cause issues, and move them upstairs to the first floor, where you can, if a breaker blows, trips, because of the appliances we have nowadays, and because how sensitive the breakers are by code, that you can easily go flip the switch and get power back on. You don't have to go trudge down the stairs and go over in the corner and fight anything. Concerning basements, there's really nothing that belongs in your basement anymore. We don't, other than if you could really do canning, you don't need to have anything in your basement. It's just going to attract, especially wood products, it's only going to attract moisture and be an issue.
Well, what about your furnace or boiler?
Furnace and boiler have to be down in the basement, but they're metal and they're going to run and be fine. There again, you're running your dehumidifier, so you're reducing the amount of moisture, so things aren't going to rust as quickly. And so that's the best way to approach that.
Okay. And then Diane writes, any input on how to find the history of your house, additions or owners? And I'm glad you asked that question, Diane, because we do have a program coming up in July, July 13th, on how to research the history of your house. So hope you'll join us then. But Steve,
can I give a little brief description now?
Sure.
If your house is located in Rockingham County, you're way ahead of the curve, because Rockingham County on their website has all of the records going back to 1640 all the way up to now. So you can do this incredible amount of research online at night in your own free time. Follow the grantor and grantees deeds. You can also, you have to go in person though, and assuming that COVID is going to be lifted fairly soon, you have to go. The good thing to do is look at the probate records. That'll give you, when someone dies, what the house inventory is. They may even tell you exactly what furniture was in each room. The house at Strawberry Bank, I was able to determine exactly what furniture was in each room in 1805 after the sea captain died 3 years previous, which is kind of fun. The other thing you can do, you can check your local historical society. They're a good place to start. Old maps. There's a lot of stuff that can be done online now compared to what used to be. But please tune into that session. I'm sure there'll be a lot more explanation on how to go through that process.
Yeah, and maps and all kinds of stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. No additional questions, but I do have one. Importance of a cyclical maintenance plan, Steve, which you did touch on this also, but.
Yes, if you're doing a whole house restoration all at once, you don't have much of a maintenance plan. We don't recommend the use of gutters on old houses typically, because no one will clean them on a bi-yearly basis. It just doesn't happen. You're lucky if they get cleaned once every 5 years. So we don't recommend gutters on buildings, but gutters are a problem. As you saw that house that had water problem and rot because of gutter leaking. That's really important. Paint is really important. If you go with a high quality paint, typically we use Sherwin-Williams Duration paint. We've used it over the years and been very pleased with it. We've got projects where paint's been on the house for 15 years or more before it has to be receiving a new coat. That's really important. Your windows, storm windows over your old windows are very important in protecting that resource of your old windows from further deterioration and glazing loss and things like that. You always want to repair your old windows if possible and put a good quality stone window on. The tests have been done. The jury is out. Having old windows that are restored, properly weather stripped with the addition of a storm window has the same R value as a brand new window that's only meant to last for 15 years. So you can see why it's important to maintain your old windows and apply storm windows to that.
In New Hampshire, we're fortunate to have lots of window restoration contractors. And I have a list that I can send folks.
Everybody has a list. You want to make plans ahead. Everybody's extremely busy, extremely busy. I don't know what else to say beyond that. Everybody's busy.
Yeah. And Steve, you were talking about latches. what is the transition period between latches and knobs? I was just wondering. 1860s, did you say? 50s?
You see them as early as, I believe, 1830s.
Okay.
1840 to 1860 is when you see the Bennington knob. It looks like a, I don't know how to explain it. It's looks like it's grained. It has a brown look to it. It's grained. Yeah, you'll see that. And it's basically based upon the thickness of the doors. You got to be able to get a mortise set in there to allow that knob to work. And so on a thin door, you really can't fit it in there very well. Right. So once we went to thicker doors, then it was easier to come up with the technology to make the knobs work.
Okay. All right, so I think at this time, there are no more questions in the chat. I'm going to do my closing comments, and then if folks want to stay on for an additional 15 minutes or so afterwards, Steve said he would do that. And maybe at that time, we can unmute ourselves and have a little more casual conversation. But anyway, at this time, I just want to thank Steve again for this practical information to help guide us with the stewardship of our older homes and buildings and what to look for and how to deal with certain issues. Steve's been an amazing advocate for historic buildings in New Hampshire, and we applaud his interest and dedication to educating property owners and building stewards with best practices in caring for these historic structures. Thoughtful and experienced presenters like Steve and your great questions and involvement make a huge impact on preservation interests and efforts across New Hampshire. We want you to know that the Alliance is here to help. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at bt@nhpreservation.org or go to our website. We have all kinds of great information relating to preservation, house stewardship, barn stewardship, community building. And our website is nhpreservation.org. Our next Expo session will be on Thursday, June 10th at noon with garden designer and author Bill Noble presenting Spirit of Placemaking in New England Garden. So if you are a gardener or if you have historic gardens around your house, it's a program you definitely do not want to miss. Again, visit our website, nhpreservation.org, for a full list of our upcoming Expo programs and to register. And be sure to check out our Expo guide of 50 products and service providers on the Expo page of our website. And for those of you who have been to our in-person Expo in the past, you know how we love to give away door prizes as a token of our appreciation. So at this time, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Nicole Flynn, to announce the lucky winner of Building History of New England, which is the book that Steve was promoting by the retired New Hampshire State architectural historian, James L. Garvin. It's a wonderful resource filled with all kinds of great information, a must-have for anyone interested in learning about and dating their historic house. It's one of my favorite go-to reference books. So at this time, I will turn it over to Nicole.
So the person that I randomly selected has left the chat. Should I announce it anyway?
Yes, go ahead. If he was on earlier, or she.
All right. The winner is Priscilla Chellis. So we'll be emailing her to let her know that she won our door prize.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks.
And thanks again to Steve for his informative presentation, to our Old House and Barn Expo on the Road sponsors, including Bedard Preservation and Restoration, for making these programs possible. And all the other sponsors are listed on the screen here. And to all of you who are supporters of our critical work that helps to advance efforts and save special places around New Hampshire. We wish you all well and look forward to seeing you at future Expo sessions. So at this time, thank you all for joining, and those who would like to stay on, please do so. And Steve, you can stop sharing and feel free to unmute yourselves if you would like to join in an additional discussion. Thank you all for joining. Okay.
I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for making the leap and being involved with old houses. We need more people to continue to want to do that. there's an issue nowadays with a lot of the younger people. They don't seem to have a very much appreciation for old buildings and old things. So we have to keep this alive, and you guys are on the leading edge doing that. It's easy for me. You're the ones who are making the financial investment. I'm just trying to help you along a little bit. So,
Hi, Lori.
Hi there again, Beverly.
How are you?
This has been a wonderful series. Actually, I did buy your book earlier, Steve, so it's a great resource. But I wanted to ask you something about recladding barns.
mm-hmm.
I have an old barn that's been looked at by a couple of people, and it has new shiplap siding on some of the sides and very old wood that probably from the barn when it was moved in the 50s from another farm. Anyway, it's deteriorated. And the sides are all parallel boards, various widths. And the gables have a feathered board across the gable end with windows on each side. That is completely deteriorated, and the tar paper is starting to become exposed. I was wondering if it's appropriate to use a shingle. I saw your barn renovations that you'd done replaced a lot of that vertical siding with shingles. And I live in a historic village, Hillsborough Center, that has barns with shingles on it. And to fit in the gables, it seems easier to use a shingle than try and feather those wide planks to make it look like it was done when this barn got moved. So I just wanted your opinion on that.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Lori. So
sure.
Are you in the historic district?
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to have to get permission from Hillsborough if you do want to make that change from what you have there now to shakes, cedar shakes or whatever.
Right.
And then
I'm in touch. I mean, everyone lives right here, and this selectman whose chairman is my friend. That's all well and good. Okay. I just want, and the fact that the barn was moved in the 50s and repurposed for another use means that all the parts to it have been manipulated in a way. So I think you would carry more weight, and what your opinion is would be something valuable for me to present an argument for or against. So far, everybody I've heard on this program has way more knowledge than anybody in the historic district. So that's probably normal.
Yeah, it's just the only reason I bring it up is that there are 240 some odd towns and territories in the state of New Hampshire, and every single one of them operate differently.
Right.
Their building inspectors are all different. They treat the codes all different.
Right. They do.
Historical society. There's different historical societies have different levels of expertise and different, more stringent on rules and regulations than others are. But if they're giving you if you feel you have to go ahead to do that, then I think you have to look at the issue about is the existing sheathing that's on the barn. I assume it's vertical sheathing that runs around.
It's various. There's all different types on all four sides.
Okay. I'm assuming it's in good enough condition that you could nail shakes onto them.
Oh, absolutely. The barn itself is superb. It was done beautifully. It's in excellent condition. It's strictly the gable ends and the two gable sides that need to be fixed.
Yeah.
And I just figured, so I'd shiplap the lower part and want to redo the gables. And I thought the shingles would look good because they're easier to do than that feathered wide board. They're super wide boards that are on the floor, but they're like potato chips now. They're so rotted.
Right. So that, like I said, if you've been kind of given the go ahead to do that, and the material is suitable to be nailed shakes onto, and they will stay on there effectively.
Right.
Then you can go ahead and do that. You just want to make sure you get a good quality shake to do that. And I've got to tell you, shakes have gone through the roof in cost also right now.
Yeah.
And they're almost tripled in cost of what they were a year ago per bundle. And so you want to get a good quality shake that has no knots, at least no knots below 5 inches of exposure from the bottom up.
Okay.
Okay, if you can get them that they're second clears, which are a little more quality rather than the extra clears, they're even better to use. But that's what, and you're going to be putting those on with a galvanized nail or a stainless steel nail.
But you think that look, that's a historic facade, is to have a shingle combined with the vertical shiplap boards on the sides?
There are examples around of that same look and technology. And if you have anything in your district that has that, then I would think that you're capable of using that same process.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Steve, is there anything Lori should consider when the shingles are butting up against trim in terms of the depth? Like, is the shingle going to start sticking beyond the trim?
Well, that's all part of the process that you have to try to figure out. Yeah. If you have, I assume you have trim boards that go over the shiplap boards on the gable end and stick out.
The gable end, no, that there are trim boards around the windows, and the feathered boards, wide boards, butt up against those. I don't believe they go over the top.
Okay, but what happens when you get to the roof? The eaves.
There's an overhang.
There's an overhang.
It goes, yeah.
Okay. Well, so that all that trim detail and overhang is applied over those boards.
Right.
So if they're at least 3/4 of an inch in thickness, then you could put the shakes on it and they wouldn't stick out past the trim.
Okay.
That's what I think that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. Yeah, just to consider.
The trim has to go over the top of the shingles, right?
No. Trim's going to go up. The shingle's going to go up against the. I don't have a board here. I would show you. The trim. The shingle is going to go up against the trim.
Okay.
Yeah, not behind it.
Thank you.
No problem.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Any other folks on here?
Yes, Diane.
Oh, hi, Diane.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I'm so thrilled I found this. I'm getting such great information. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, windows. My home the front of it is 1870. It's in Lakeport. And I have the original windows with the wavy glass. So I have 2/2 with matching storm windows 2/2. So of course I've had plastic on it the last 2 winters. You are saying that storm windows will work. Everyone's telling me that storm windows won't be enough. I would love to keep the original windows, and I would like your input about storm windows.
Well, there again, we've done the math. They actually got sent to a, I don't know, what is that called, Beverly?
Are you talking about the Vermont study or something else?
Vermont study, yeah, the Vermont study is what I was thinking of. Well, they actually did an official study where they did the R value of a refurbished old window, properly weather stripped with a good quality storm window on the outside, and found the R value to be exactly similar to a new house window.
And what are some of the questions I will ask someone who is telling me they know what they're doing?
On how to redo the windows?
Yeah, I've had several people do wrong things already, and I've only owned the house for 3 years.
Oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry you had a bad experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, arm yourself with as much information as you can before you meet with people, so that you're aware of what things they may bring up. What would happen is that your windows would get reglazed, and they would get weather stripped appropriately, and they'd be tightened up, such that they would still work well, but not bang around in the openings. That's really important. And then that wooden storm window now that you have on will not fit as tightly as a new storm, double track or triple track aluminum window. So those range, and I just got quoted a price to do some 9/6 windows. I believe there was the storm window was $410 a piece installed.
But I think Diane's asking what she can do to use her existing historic storms, right, Diane?
No,
No?
I'm ready to put on modern storms.
Oh, you are?
Needs
Okay.
to be tight. She wants to be able to open the windows, put a screen in, all those kind of things,
Yep.
right, Diane? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to use the old storms for a greenhouse.
Oh,
And I have to tell you, when I first moved into my house 44 years ago, I wanted to do the right thing historically, so I had wooden stone windows made up. And 3 years later, I was taking them off and replacing them because water, as you probably are aware, water will get down behind them. You get moisture between the stone window and your regular window, and it's just not a good. They're a maintenance issue. They got to be painted all the time. You can't open them when you want to. So I have no problem with switching over to a new storm window.
Yes, I have one window that has failed. I have a wraparound porch, so the other windows were protected, but one is rotted. I'll have to have that.
Yeah. So a greenhouse use is a great use. Great idea.
Great, wonderful, thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
so, and Diane, if you need any names of window restoration contractors, feel free to send me an email and I can send that to you.
But I have to tell you, the people on Beverly's list, if you are not the least expensive you can find, in that they do a great job, but they tend to work on buildings that are on the National Register, things like that, and they can be, a 9/6 window to have them redo one can be $1,000 or more.
Yes, but they might know someone.
But they might know somebody. You might know someone locally. Check if your windows are in pretty good condition, glazing wise, you may just need someone who can do some touch-up glazing and painting. And then
you could do it yourself, Diane. And we usually do a window workshop every year, but because of COVID, we don't have one scheduled this year. But it is very much doable by the homeowner if you're into that.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
Yeah.
What do you do about squeaky floors?
The squeaky floor.
That's a good question.
Well,
1902 house.
How many squeaky floors do you have?
Well, I don't know. Probably the whole thing.
Well, it's good to know if if there's someone in the house. It's a good burglar alarm, no doubt about it. But what you can do is, what's happening is because of the heat and the difference in temperature and humidity levels, your wood floors are shrinking and moving. And what typically happens is you will over time develop a space between either the subfloor and the finished floor, or the subfloor and the floor joists that carry the weight. And so what you can do is make sure that the boards are refastened down through appropriately and they're held tight. But you can also put in wedges between the floor joists and the bottom of the subfloor to help take some of that squeak out.
Okay.
Give that a shot.
And that was my sister who won the prize, so I notified her that she'll be getting a notification.
Does she have a historic house? I'm assuming she does.
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
Do you know the approximate date?
17 something Cape, I believe, or maybe it's 1800, early 1800.
Wonderful. She'll love it.
Martha, maybe she lets you borrow the book once in a while.
Pardon me?
Maybe she lets you borrow the book once in a while.
Yeah, well, I told her, I said, I wanted to win that book.
Wonderful. Okay.
If I had to buy one book that explained all of the items that we're talking about concerning dating a building, I would say that would be the one that'd be the one I would want to keep.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Well, she was surprised when I called her. So.
Well, we're sorry she left us early.
Yeah.
But glad she joined.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. I got a lot of information.
Okay. All right, great.
To think of.
Thank you all for joining. We appreciate it. And Steve, thank you again.
And all of these are online too.
Yes, we will be.
In case I missed some. I know I missed a couple.
We're posting everything to our website. Yeah.
Okay,
And I'll be
great.
sending a follow-up email with links.
Okay, thanks so
Okay.
much. Have a good
All
night.
right. Thank you all for joining. And thanks again, Steve. Have a great evening, everybody.
All right, take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.